Good morning, everyone. My name is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Educational Programs for Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First, I'd like to welcome everyone to the webinar, So Long to Spreadsheets and QuickBooks, a fond farewell. Increasing business complexity amplifies the risks associated with using spreadsheets across the enterprise and using QuickBooks as your company's primary accounting system. Continuing developments in cloud and related technologies have transformed the economics of upgrading to and unlocking the power of the ERP solution and related financial applications that empower better strategic decisions, in addition to mitigating many of the risk exposures associated with extensive reliance on Excel and QuickBooks. Our webinar today will offer an overview of the economic drivers of upgrading to a Cloud ERP, practical advice for changing the spreadsheet and or QuickBooks culture at your company, and insights into how to define the value proposition of various cloud applications for your company. I would like to thank NetSuite Adaptive Planning, whose commitments to thought leadership help us make this event possible and delivered at no cost, like everything on Proformative. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we'll hear a presentation from our featured speaker, Tom Kelly, and then we'll move into an interactive Q&A session where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you, so if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we will do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards with any questions we did not get to. A few logistical notes about the webinar. A link to today's presentation and video will be sent to all attendees within 24 hours of the event and will be posted on Proformative. Those who would like CPE credits through NASBA will need to answer all polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credits. For any questions on CPE credits, you'll need to contact Tanya Walsh at twalsh@proformative.com. We'll have Tanya's contact information available again later in the webinar. You'll be asked to take a short survey regarding today's webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer to our event and attendees for their valuable time. A quick word about Proformative. Proformative is the largest, fastest growing online community resource for senior level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. Proformative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice and insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges they face every day. Let's get started by introducing today's featured speaker, Tom Kelly, Director, T. Edward Incorporated. As a Managing Director of T. Edward Incorporated, Tom serves as a strategic partner and CFO, CIO for several unique companies. Portfolio companies include Cardia Health Systems and OnPoint Medical Diagnostics, organizations that were created commercializing software intellectual property from leading healthcare solutions. His insights have been gleaned from years of working with clients striving to build on-demand environments that leverage the cloud to ensure crisp and timely execution of a company's strategy. He has shifted many business leaders' perspectives and assumptions about how to effectively and efficiently run a business completely in the cloud. Tom has held senior management positions with large publicly held companies like PepsiCo and Deluxe Corporation, as well as small cap and privately held entities such as Evenex and PeopleNet Communications. He is a CPA with an MBA in finance from Fordham University and a BA in accounting from North Carolina State University. Tom likes when I get that in there, North Carolina State. Go with that. With that, it's my pleasure to hand the floor over to our featured speaker, Tom Kelly. Tom?
Thank you, Ernie. Yes, it's very near and dear to me. Please don't say I'm a North Carolina grad. That would not go over well with my my alumni friends. So, well, thank you all for dialing in here today to the webinar. And what I'd like to be able to talk through today is going to be the wondrous experience that we have with our spreadsheets and in some companies, in many cases, the use of QuickBooks and the combination of the two. All right. So a quick question, is this you? So quote is, and I'm sure many of you have said this, I too have said it in different ways. We've had plenty of information. We have plenty of information. It was all over the place. It was in spreadsheets, QuickBook reports, emails, but it wasn't integrated. Consolidated reporting was manual and tedious. It could take many hours, and I would, for a large report, I've seen that happen many days, and we couldn't vouch for the high degree of accuracy. Kind of a fitting comment for what we're talking about here today. So let's talk about the applications journey, so maybe small to mid-sized businesses go through. You start with QuickBooks or perhaps some other similar offering. You add Excel for analytics, right? So we love to download and tweak and spin and become what I guess the report jockeys of the world, if you will. Then you think, well, gee, we need a little CRM work here, so we're going to add something like an ACT database or Goldmine or even Salesforce these days. Then you may have built a homegrown website because you're selling stuff on the web, and you've probably upgraded QuickBooks many times to either get more functionality or add more seats or whatever it might be. So, and if you see those arrows, this is almost like a never-ending experience, right? You can keep going through this over and over again, right? Get better at Excel, do better pivot tables, maybe, enhance some of the CRM capabilities, maybe switch from something like an ACT to Salesforce. And then, with regards to QuickBooks, looking at certain things, trying to upgrade it to the greatest thing. What that does is over time, if you took a step back and let's say for the 3 or 5 years you've been doing this, think about the money and the resources that costs you. And not just in terms of, here's the cost of my, number of users for any particular software or the maintenance agreements I may have with Microsoft every year because we want to make sure we're paying that in case there's an upgrade. But the resources that are involved in this, kind of the movement of files amongst users. And then not to mention the integrations. For those of you who have tried to integrate things, that is, have something in the middle that's going to connect all these things together for you. I feel your pain. I've been there many times. I think in my career, I used to have a full head of hair like Ernie, and then with all the integrations I've tried to do over the years between the all the different systems, I have lost quite a bit of my hair. So it's been a tough road to hoe, no doubt about it. So this was a survey done by the IMA, and you see that gentleman pop up there. And I always talk about 80-20, and as we all know, that's the Pareto analysis, if you will. Well, Pareto was an Italian economist. For those of you are wondering where it all came from, and back in 1906, this is the truth, and he discovered that 80% of Italy's land was only owned by 20% of the population. And with that knowledge, he soon started to observe that 20% of the pea pods in his garden were producing 80% of his peas. So first of all, this was obviously a man who had a lot of time on his hand, but not to mention this 80-20 analysis, I think we all can agree that it definitely lends itself to many scenarios in life. And when you take a look at that, the first two items, integration of systems and BI, which stands for business intelligence, so that's 77%, but so we're accountants, so we'll round up and we'll make Wilfredo proud, and we'll say that 80% of kind of the frustrations that we endure, if you will, whether it's finance or even business-wide, is the integration of data and the intelligence you get on that information, right? So the decisions we want to make. And then obviously there are other issues, right? Replace the siloed systems. We've kind of talked about that, where you may have sales with Goldmine or ACT or Salesforce, and finance has QuickBooks, et cetera. So these are the frustrations that I think are exhibited day in and day out, not just within the finance group, but probably across the organization. So another question that the survey asked is they wanted opportunities to improve. And again, you can add till you get to 80% here, but the biggest one is business intelligence. So out of all the respondents, 32% felt that the need for business intelligence was key within an organization. What's also interesting is look at 17% indicate ease of use. So it's one thing to have these things in place, and there's many of them out there that will do it for you, middleware, if you will, or you can try to do it yourself. But the ease of use, I would argue, is probably not where it needs to be when you have disparate systems and disparate data around the organization. So let's talk about moving to the cloud, something that I, as a humble financial person, accountant, embarked on, I think, going back to the early 2000s, believe it or not, and have had quite a lot of success with it. And when I say success, I'm not just talking about we implemented the software, but success in terms of in a business unit operating more efficiently, systems working in harmony, if you will, and being able to make very quick decisions with an easy-to-use interface. So what are some of the reasons to move to the cloud? Number one, access your IT and data and leading technology applications anytime, anywhere, anyhow. What I mean by that is the cloud is well, the internet, if you will. If you have access to a high-speed internet connection and you have, my gosh, in these days, even a smartphone, you can get access to your data. And that access is usually secured, meaning there is, it's encrypted, it's password protected, so you're only given certain visibility to data. So it's pretty profound in terms of having data, anywhere, anytime, in the right place at the right time to make that decision. Tier 4 data centers, they safeguard the IT resources and your data, meaning in this day and age, when most companies have a data room, and God bless them, it might be a closet with a fan in it, or maybe it's a little bit more involved where you actually put a floor where you have some servers sitting on top of it, and it's air conditioned, etc. My point would be is I would rest a little bit easier knowing that a top-tiered cloud provider is safeguarding my data. And one point about that, let's be clear, I would be sure that you're talking about a situation where it's 24/7, 365, and people are monitoring it minute by minute, second by second. And anytime there's a problem, it is jumped upon immediately. If these folks don't do that, they're not going to be around, and they will not be successful. Number 3, cost-effective. Monthly payments eliminates the large CapEx expenditure. So in the on-premise world, whether it's QuickBooks or even Excel, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, you're going to make an on-prem payment, and you're going to use it, and you're going to appreciate it. So particularly in small to mid-sized businesses, I think cash flow is king. So the ability to spread those payments out at what I would consider to be a decent rate, not having to pay interest, not having to pay for a loan, you have the opportunity to mitigate some of the cash outflow that's usually involved when you're using ERP-type systems or accounting-type systems. What's also starting to happen more and more these days is the remote work and work from any device. So as I mentioned, you can have a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop or a notebook, and you can access this information because it's written for the web, right? It's not an ASP where you've got something running on a server. It's coloed somewhere, and somebody's maintaining it for you, but you're accessing it through your a wide area network. It's not really internet-based. And the ability to work from anywhere, whether it's your home, whether it's on a plane these days, now that they have high-speed internet Wi-Fi on the planes, which I guess some of us who travel a lot are not happy about that because now we don't even have any time to rest, but nonetheless you have that opportunity. And when you think about what I was saying before, 24/7, 365 monitoring and responsiveness. So many of the cloud producers, such as the Salesforce.coms, Google, NetSuite, etc., they have redundancy, meaning they have more than one data center. So let's just say a bomb explodes on one of the data centers, you're immediately turned and transferred over, and the traffic goes to the other data center. Or in some cases, they have more than 2. So the point there is they're monitoring this, they're staying on top of it, they're being proactive to address situations, and if they do come up, things that are not necessarily within their control, they also have a fail-safe way of keeping the data flowing so that you don't go down. Scalable infrastructures that support growth or contraction. The example I give to folks is if you're going to go out and buy QuickBooks, think about that as your house. It's a single structure, single entity, single tenancy, so you have one family living in it. Then think about an apartment building. That's multi-tenancy. So in other words, what you have now is you can think about a large apartment building, you're sharing the plumbing, you're sharing the electricity as far as how it's getting into the building. So there's multiple tenants on this. And what's interesting when you talk about some of these cloud providers is you get into the conversation of, well, can you scale? If you take any of these cloud providers and add the number of users that they have holistically across, all their servers, there's no company in the world that's anywhere near that size. So from a scalable standpoint, I think that's another thing you need to consider why you'd want to move to the cloud and not worry about it. Break the software upgrade adventure. I can't say enough about this, but in many cases, anytime there's an upgrade, your IT group will probably tell you, well, we're going to upgrade the software this weekend, and hopefully when you come back in on Monday, everything will be working well. And Murphy's Law, does tend to pervade this area where you come back in and the system's not quite up yet, so you try to go back to the old system, but that's not quite available, so you may have 2 or 3 days of downtime because you're dealing with the upgrade. And then once the upgrade is done, you can access it. Then you have problems with all the wonderful connections, a la the integrations we talked about earlier. They all still working. And so you can imagine it's quite a headache, and it's been experienced time and time again in the business world and still exists today in many cases. Redundancy, failover protection, and ultimate data disaster recovery. So like I had mentioned before, there is multi-location data centers, so we have fail-safe cutovers, redundancy, so there's, you're not just relying on one thing. And frankly, when you think about disaster recovery with the floods we've had or the tornadoes or some of the natural disasters that we've experienced lately, think about what might happen to you and your data. Whereas if it's being backed up in the cloud every single day by these key providers, you'll have access to that history. So your disaster recovery plan or need is almost taken care of when you make this move. Integration of the front and back office processes. Can't stress this enough when we talk about the integrations. So you would immediately be able to know if you were a salesperson if a customer was put on credit hold, because you're going to get that alert right away because you're all in the same database. Big deal when you talk about wanting to be nimble, quick, and efficient. And focus efforts on core purposes of the business. So in other words, if you're selling shoes, or you're a retail operation, or you're a software service provider, or whatever it is that you're doing, consulting, et cetera, you can focus on your business. You don't have to worry about the IT maintenance. Is it going to be there for me? Is it going to be available? So on and so forth. Excuse me. So beyond the core financials, let's talk a little bit about this, where there's a trait and then the business benefit. So the opportunity to cash integration. So, kind of, order to cash, if you will. When you have a connected system that is reliable, redundant, et cetera, you can process bills much faster. And I would argue with improved accuracy. So everybody's seeing the same data. If somebody sees an issue, they can, pipe up about it. When you think about that process, that process flow, right? When you initialize the sales order to when you actually fulfill that item, if anybody's made, typo errors and things like that, there's several eyes that are seeing this. So you're probably going to catch that problem before it even goes out the door. So it definitely improves your accuracy. Procure to pay integration. So when you talk about the elimination of spreadsheets, or quite frankly, the approval process, about how you go through approving it in a fast and efficient way, what's the workflow, as opposed to, I use an example like vacation policy. Most companies probably have a piece of paper. You're going to walk down to HR. You're going to get that piece of paper, go back to your desk, fill it out, hopefully fill it out correctly, take it back to probably your boss. Hey, please sign this and send it to HR. Hopefully he or she remembers to do that. Maybe they don't. It becomes your vacation day. Nobody knows about it. Finally, they figure it out. They get the paper back to HR. It gets input into the payroll system. You can imagine, you can use that example across many different things we do in business today, but that's probably the one that I would argue all of us have experienced at one time or another. E-commerce to accounting. So we talked about, the fulfillment of the product, and you can reduce the risk of those errors. So when you have many, many eyes seeing this, workflow process throughout the system, you're going to catch some of these errors before you even get to the end of the process and you ship that product out the door. Services to accounting. So accurate project profitability for those companies out there that are doing project software implementation, law firms, you name it. You can get a very clear picture as to what's going on in the detail of what's within those projects across the board, not just by the person who's the project leader, but across the entity, whether it's administration or whether it's the actual people doing the work. And one view of the customer. This is really key. So when I gave you the idea or the example of I have a salesperson who's out in the field and they need to get information that the customer is put on credit hold, if you're all dealing within one system, you can have alert set up that's going to alert you to an issue with a particular customer. Or even another thing, let's say you're going to go call on a customer because you happen to be in a city where your main intent was to call on a current customer, and this other customer has been a customer for a year. You can actually go into the system, look at what's going on with that customer real time. Have they had any complaints? Are they really happy about something? Have they asked a question about, gee, we'd like to maybe expand our purchasing of your product? You can actually get that information and be armed with that when you walk in the door, and you haven't had to call accounting. You haven't had to ask for some reports written. You haven't had to log into a different system. You've got that information. So that's pretty impressive when you walk into a client and you're armed with that information real time. Another thing I want to make sure here is let's talk about ensuring that it will grow with your business. So ensuring that solution that you're going to choose, whatever it might be, is it going to grow with my business? Or, like I had mentioned earlier, is it going to contract? Because another thing you have to remember here is cloud applications based on the number of users. So think of email address equals user. Well, in this day and age, unfortunately, in some cases, the businesses are contracting. you normally have the opportunity with these cloud providers to reestablish your usage contract, let's say, every year. So you come up on what they call renewal. So at that time, you can say, I don't need 20 users anymore, I need 10. So the point I want to make there is, think about the on-premise world. Normally, you're going to make a payment that's something going to be in place for three years. You don't really get a chance to get that money back. It's out the door, and you don't have access to it anymore. So let's talk about some of the traits and business benefits here in this regard. It can support multi-subsidiary and multi-chart of accounts. So as your business grows in a positive way, you can manage that consolidation, right? So you can add subsidiaries. You can change and add to the chart of accounts that's going to fit your business or your subsidiary, given that it might be doing something different than you normally have done with the existing subsidiary. Country-specific tax and accounting regulations. So for those of us who are doing business in foreign countries, it's going to help to have the perspective on what's going on and making sure we're embracing those accounting rules, let's say in Europe or elsewhere. So the ERP needs to be able to support those local needs, whatever they may be. So when you're generating a balance sheet, income statement, et cetera, it could be in a language of that land, if you will. But you also have the ability to consolidate the results on up if you're a U.S.-based entity. So from a consolidation standpoint, you're compliant with what our rules are here. But even in the local land, you're compliant with their rules and their reporting requirements too. Automated sales tax management, dealing with this one right now. You can imagine as the economy has gone down that state, local, and municipalities are just very diligent on wanting to get their sales tax information. So it's almost impossible, I would say, depending, if you have a 20-location entity on a retail level, trying to stay up with all the changes in what happens with local sales taxes. There are companies out there that specialize in this and integrate wonderfully into these ERP packages. Drill down from corporate to the subsidiaries. So you technically now have the ability to not understand how we're doing in total. Let's say we want to understand how we're doing by region, and then compare one region to another, and understand why one region perhaps is doing better than another. You actually have the ability to do that real time within the system, not requiring any specialists to write reports. I think Crystal reports here, and for those of you who are Crystal report wizards, God bless you, but the day of having to be beholden to that might be gone with some of these cloud applications that you can embrace. And multi-language management, think about that in this day and age, how quickly companies can expand. One company I was involved with, we opened up an office in Malaysia, and having to get them up and running, we had the system, and literally we could have it in their language so that they could actually log in and understand it. In China too, for that matter. So pretty profound at what you can do very quickly with the offerings that these things provide you. Evaluating ongoing complexity, again, looking at traits and business benefit, easy to integrate. One of the things I will tell you with these cloud applications, when you want to connect with suppliers, channels, or vendors, it really lends itself to enabling you to, you think about Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, kind of, hey, go paint the white fence, like give me your information. It's amazing how willing they are to do it, how easy it is to do it, and how well connected it makes you with those particular constituents in your ecosystem. So the ability to have that offering is pretty profound. Self-service analytics. So in this case, maybe taking the Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn of painting the white fence down a little bit lower. For those of you out there that have ever submitted a timesheet, almost goes back to the PTO, the paid time off I was talking about, vacation, right? Because you're going to fill out an Excel spreadsheet, attach all your wonderful invoices and receipts, and you're going to take it over to your boss, and hopefully they'll sign it and send it on to payroll or AP so you can get your check. Well, imagine if that was all automated, and you never had to put together another piece of paper again, and you could use your iPhone or your Android or your BlackBerry to snap a picture of a receipt. The IRS will be accepting of that, and it gets completely workflowed electronically, and in some cases you have it integrated to your payroll system. I would probably say you cut out a lot of inefficiency in your organization, and you'd be surprised at the minimal cost that some of these applications ask of you. Easy to customize. Perhaps it's a little bit of a, maybe customize isn't the right word. I'd probably use configure here. And what I mean by that is when you implement something, probably in the on-premise world, it's not very forgiving if, let's say, you don't get the chart of accounts right, and you need to make somewhat of a major change, or Maybe you want to do some sales channel reporting. You didn't really structure that when you did the implementation. What you can find with these applications is they will allow you to do things such that you can capture certain data now on transactions going forward. Once you capture that data, it's in the database. And guess what? You can report on that now. And a plug-in ecosystem. So reduce risk of quickly outgrowing it. As I mentioned before, if you think about the single house, the single tenancy dwelling versus the multi-tenancy dwelling like the apartment building, you have the ability to scale up with these options. So if your business is growing like gangbusters, I don't think you're going to run into a situation where it's not going to be able to scale to the level you need it to. So options, options, options. So let's talk about the wonderful 4-quadrant graph. We've got on-premise on the left-hand side and cloud, and we've got accounting and suite. So when you're looking at accounting and on-premise, there's a big IT impact, right? We've got to have people on site managing it. And even I would argue when you're going to host this off-site, right? So you have somebody literally just putting, a software on a server for you. You're still having to manage the VPN connections. You still need somebody who really understands the IT impact of that. Fragmented customer. So when you think about having, just one customer and being able to deal with it and focus, IT is going to be beholden to several people. The processes are fragmented. So as I mentioned earlier, where we're going to have all these eyes looking at the workflow from, let's say, approving a travel and expense report or trying to fill an order, in the current situation, if your systems are not connected, or you don't have this one platform, you're not going to have that visibility from order to cash, and you're not going to be able to do a lot of things. And then limited self-service, I think that goes without saying. So the self-service on the submission of the travel and expense report to working with some of your vendors and having them be involved in it, it's really limited in terms of what you can provide with an on-premise accounting system. So let's talk about an on-premise suite. This is kind of a substantial IT impact. And we're talking about some of the larger packages now, so we're getting into the SAPs and the Oracles of the world. The CapEx expenditure is significant for those of you who have done it. There are integrated business processes, no doubt. You can have that visibility from order to cash. The customer can be integrated, but there's ongoing maintenance involved in this. And I say ongoing maintenance, don't think about that just in terms of the contracts you sign and you've got to pay 10% maintenance. Think about it in terms of what your IT group has to do, what the continual training has to do. Think about if you've done an upgrade, what's going to be involved in that. So the term maintenance, don't just view it as the X% you're paying on the initial purchase price each year. Think about it in terms of the actual resources you have to expend against some of these things, even just to maintain the application the way it was integrated. Now let's talk about just accounting offerings in the cloud. So these definitely are going to have a much lower IT resource impact. The CapEx will be low, but again, we're going to have fragmented processes and fragmented customer interactions because we don't have those processes connected from beginning to end. So order to cash, you're not seeing that complete visibility. You're seeing it when it comes into accounting, when we have to book it and account for it. So now, let's talk about when you have the cloud and the suite. So it's all one thing. So we've got the low IT resources and the low CapEx, but now the business processes and the customer views, they are integrated. You have your perspective from beginning to end. And when I say you, that's anybody in your company, not just the people sitting in finance, but your folks sitting on the shipping floor, your folks that are involved in dealing with the customer on a day-in basis, whether it's in the business office or whether it's outside traveling around if you have remote sales folks. I mean, it's a big deal when you're all living and breathing off of that one platform, kind of that one version of the truth. So I do tend to like some cartoons, and I find that sometimes they're pretty spot on. So you have these two individuals here, and they're looking at their business processes, and one gentleman says to the other, last year we recognized that our processes were far too complex. So we put them into the cloud. Let the cloud make your life easier. And it is that easy, folks. It's just that easy. Just put it in the cloud and life will be great. No, that's not what I'm saying, but there is a little bit of truth to this comic here. And I'll just say that, and I guess I've been doing this for 10 years now. I've seen this happen time and time again. And this is a statistical point of one, so take it for what it's worth. I have not been in a situation yet where a cloud implementation cost more than the on-premise implementation. And so that's just me talking. That's a fact. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there you can read, the pros and cons of this. Bigger companies, it's more expensive. I'm telling you hard dollar, not soft dollar, right? So I'm not saying I went and implemented something and sales is going to sell 5% more. No, I'm talking about hard dollar. That might be headcount takeout, headcount avoidance. You know, you're going to look at server costs, your IT, your lines that are going into the building, all this type of stuff. And even, believe it or not, the hardware that you have to run this stuff. Think about that. There are some offerings out there that you literally have to have a souped-up machine to run it quickly and accurately. When you think about these internet capabilities, these packages that are allowed, it has to run on a smartphone, it has to run on a laptop, a notebook, a netbook, you name it. It has to be quick and easy. You don't have to worry so much now about, what's the type of hardware I'm going to use with all this stuff. So enough said about that. So here's a little known fact. As we talk about these devices, this is coming from the New York Times, more human beings today have access to a cell phone than the United Nations says have access to a clean toilet. And Ernie asked me to put this in there. And of course, in America, we like to combine the two, our toilet with the smartphone. I'm going to leave that one. That was not nice, but in any event. So what does this really mean, right? So mobility. Think about the tablets and the smartphones that we have out there. The distributed workforce. If you're outsourcing things to, let's say, a manufacturer or some of the stuff that I do, your accounting, believe it or not. You have contingent workers. Think about folks that are running certain things. There's in agriculture, there's a need to have a flux in the workforce. If you think about 1-800-Flowers, how do you think that they get all those flowers delivered when it's Mother's Day? Do you think they have a standing workforce? No. They go out and they bring in people that are hired, on a contingent basis that are going to deliver those flowers for the Mother's Day rush, if you will. Well, in many cases, they may have a phone or whatever that can access certain things, or the company may provide it to them. So it's almost the device is not really important. It's minimum requirements, and you can deal with it. Self-service, I think I've beaten this one to death, but submission of your travel and expense reports, vacation requests. There's probably other things I'm not thinking about, but self-service even from selecting your health care benefits. I mean, you can do a lot with very little these days now with these cloud applications. And probably most importantly, I would say visibility from anywhere. So I gave you the example, the salesperson was in another town and decides to call on a certain sales opportunity, but goes to visit an existing customer, and the customer is wowed because he or she is armed with, hey, what's the latest and greatest going on with you? So you have this information to make decisions on a real-time basis, right? And you can protect it by role-basing it. So if it's a salesperson, he or she doesn't need to see everybody's payroll salary, right? You can also develop your own self-service reporting if you want. It's amazing what you can do and how simple it is to get some of the reports out of these systems. And you can also personalize it to your specific needs. So in many cases, they'll allow you to have a dashboard that, maybe you want to have the CNN newsfeed coming in. So it's amazing about what you can put, on kind of one digital dashboard to help you be as most effective as you can be in what it is that the company is asking you to do and to have influence on. So let's talk a little bit about leveraging the cloud, and I'll try to go through this a little more quickly as we're kind of bumping up here in the 15 minutes. So there's plenty of ROI, return on O, or TCO, total cost calculators out there. So if you go out there and Google ROI TCO Cloud, there's probably, when I think I last did, it might have been 2 or 3 months ago, maybe I counted 50. I think there's 500 now. So here's my point about this. You don't need to recreate the world. You don't need to boil the ocean. Just pick one that's going to fit your need and start filling it out in detail. The other thing I would argue is think about the efficiency gains you're going to get. Don't just look at the hard dollars. When I talk about efficiency, the travel and expense process, or having, order to cash and people reviewing what's going on, think about what is it, maybe it's not Six Sigma, but if I get any issues out when I'm going to ship that product, I don't have to reship it, I don't have to receive it back in. Think about what's going to happen that you're going to get with efficiency gains. I think in many cases, what companies don't do is they don't do a deep dive on the efficiency gains we're going to get by making a move like this. And it's really about that data improvement and the accessibility and the accountability. So now the data is improved, you have access to it, but it's more accurate. So there's more accountability around that data. People aren't coming in because you have 3 disparate systems with their reports and you're all arguing about whose number is right. No, it's one form of the truth. That's what we're dealing with here. It's about headcount avoidance and realignment. So in many cases, you might look at this and say, oh, well, we can get rid of, certain headcount or whatever. Well, Or maybe there are things that your company might want to do, and you can realign some of the headcount. Or guess what? Avoidance. I have seen time and time again when you implement a new system, guess what? You're going to go out and hire more people to run the doggone thing. Whether it's the users being able to get something out of it, or it's the IT group because they need to support it. And it's about pain point relief. All right? So it's about those processes that kind of drive you nuts, that require a lot of resource, that really are viewed upon as non-value added. It doesn't help you sell another widget or whatever it is your company does. It's got to relieve those pain points. And I'll get into one at the end here of my rant, if you will, about checks, but we'll get into that. It's about effectively and efficiently running a business. So the other thing I want to point out here is we talk about efficiency, right? So we do it faster, better, cheaper, but it's also talking about effectively, right? So the measurements that you choose to run your business, you better get those measurements in the people's hands that need them so they can react to them, they can be proactive on them, and they can have an impact on them. And you want to make sure that that stuff is accurate, right? So when they get that information, I don't want to have put any doubt in their mind that that number isn't right. It is right. We all believe it's right. Now you need to do something about it. And at the end of the day, I guess it's really about focusing on what matters most. What does your business do, and what does it need to do to become better? Okay, so I don't want to say that the cloud and these systems are a commodity, but frankly, in my mind, that's what it really has to get to. And I think the cloud's getting us very, very close to that, and that how we run our business and the systems we run it on really can become commoditized to an effect. In other words, like Ernie mentioned, I do a lot of work for many different companies. I have healthcare companies, like he mentioned. I also have a company that uses technology to feed pigs in a pig barn. I kid you not. And what's interesting to me is those companies that come out of world-class health institutions, and the person who's developing this technology to feed the pigs so we can enjoy our pork roast, about 85% of what they do is exactly the same. They have employees, they pay bills, they send out invoices, they collect cash. I'm telling you, it's not that hard to get these businesses, regardless of who you are, on these options and offerings that are out there. So, for those of you who may watch Mythbusters, I want to bust some truths, the truth about cloud computing. So let's bust some myths. Please don't tell. I don't know if it's the Discovery Channel, because Ernie put that in there. You want to sue Ernie. So let's talk about the uptime myth, right? And this is one that really, over time, has really kind of bugged me, right? So one of the things I usually ask when I go into a company is that they're like, well, what if the system's down? I said, that's a good point. I said, can you tell me, has your email or your ERP system or your CRM system ever been down or not available? Does your IT group track that? I'm usually met with a very confused look, like, what do you mean? Why are you asking that? Of course we don't do that. Well, I'll tell you, in my career over time, and I'm sure in some of yours, just the change in an email system, or in the days of the BlackBerry, bringing in the BlackBerry Bez server, I can't tell you, we were out of email for 4 or 5 days. Think about this, availability. Most of the top-notch companies in their contract will give you 99.5 uptime. What does that mean, from an IT standpoint? 995, okay, well, what does that mean for you and I? How many hours am I going to be out? So that means 43.92 hours you're going to be down, all right? You won't be able to access the system. People see that and they go, oh, well, I can't be down for 43 or 44 hours. No way. Well, the thing to point out, folks, is that 44 hours is usually spread across 365 days. So maybe you might be down for an hour or two here or there. Sometimes you don't even notice the outage. So the point I want to make here is to get out of the, we can't go to the cloud because, we can't afford to have any downtime. Well, take a look at your history as a company. I bet you're going to find out that your downtime is worse than 99.5 across some of your systems, some of your critical systems. Some of the better companies, as you start to go up, they may offer 995 in their contract, but they may be delivering 997, 998, or 999. Look at what happens to those hours. That's 35 hours or 26 hours, 997, only 18 hours, 998, and less than 9 hours at 999. So believe me, I think, and the other thing I'll point out about this is when one of these companies goes down, I love it because the world's watching. I don't have to worry about knowing whether they went down or not. Google's front page news, Salesforce, NetSuite, they're all front page news when they have an outage. So the world is watching. So believe me, they're going to want to make sure they don't have any downtime. The next thing is the data security myth, and I talked about this a little bit before. So we got the 4-tier data centers, you got the redundancy, the failover, everything else. What I have found, for those of you out there who are involved in healthcare, the wonderful HIPAA Act, right? So to be compliant with that, where the breakdown usually happens, it's not the system, it's the individual. People having, a patient's social security number, sticky to their computer screen. People not, destroying things. People not, handling credit card information, taking it in an email. That's the security issue. The security issue is not about your data not being secure. Now, let me just say one other thing. So if somebody wants to hack into these systems, they're trying. They're trying every day. But these companies have people that are trying to stay one step ahead of those folks. I would guarantee you that if any hacker wanted to sit out in your parking lot and hack into your system, they could do it in a matter of hours. And that's the truth, and I've done that once before. So the point I want to make there is, let's let the experts take care of the data security. Let's make sure we internally within our processes bird dog that and make sure that we do the right thing from the handoffs and what we need to do from the human factor, okay? And the other thing I'd point out here from a security standpoint, you now can leverage the SAS 70 Type 2 compliances that most of these companies will have. So you even kind of can, check off that box, if you will, in terms of, if your customer asks you, how secure is your data, well, you can show them right away by going to their website and downloading their certificate. Another thing I've personally found, and again, I'm speaking a little personal experience here, is the difficult learning curve, right? The cloud, it's going to be hard to learn. You got some of these couple applications, and people are going to get confused. And usually what I ask is I say, well, have you ever ordered anything on Amazon? Or sometimes I ask, are people using Gmail? And everybody's hands go up. What I tend to find with the interfaces and the user interfaces on these web-based systems is they're somewhat similar, application to application, kind of like the days of when Microsoft, you had Excel and you're using that, and then you maybe used Word, and then you really got bold and you dabbled in PowerPoint a little bit. And you started to find that, the menus are kind of similar. And same thing is true here. And what I've tended to find is when you do go into an implementation, there is a little bit of chaos. That's normal. That's going to happen. But I find that the recovery and that learning curve is a lot quicker with these cloud applications than I found with the on-premise ones. So again, lesson learned from myself in my personal experience, and I've talked to others. They too have experienced this rather quick learning curve. So the scalability myth, I think we've talked about that. So here it is for you in a nice picture, right? You've got the single family dwelling there, and that's my house, if you're wondering. I put the roof on myself, just kidding. But things like Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, these are single tenant isolated, right? You spend your resources on individual maintenance and system changes. Business model is based on upgrades, and the latest install pales in comparison to the cloud-based providers. Multi-tenant shared, we've got NetSuite, Google, Salesforce. Pick your cloud provider there. They spend resources on innovation. They want to come up with the next latest and greatest thing, and they put it into the system. The business model is based on customer success, adoption, and service. The word churn is a bad word in this world. They do not want to lose customers, right? They are giving you a service, and it better be a good experience. And these numbers are probably outdated, but NetSuite has over $50 billion application requests annually, or 50 billion application requests. And Google has over 30 million users. Please tell me a company out there that has 30 million employees on their email system. I don't know if there is one, but if you find one, please email it to me. I want to know who it is. So here's a little, I took some screenshots of when I told you before, go out and pick your ROI, or total cost of ownership calculator. This is just a couple of them. Trust me, you'll find a whole lot more, and they can be real pretty and all. And, I would just say leverage these. You don't need to create it yourself. And the real cost, in this personal experience, not been in a situation yet where the cloud application implementation didn't offset the costs of an on-premise implementation. And so here, pictorially, it's drawing for you. So we have Bob the Cat down there at the bottom, if you remember him, the CIO, CFO, and CEO, the application Hairball. And this is a actual picture or a representation of a company that I'm currently working with. These are all the systems that they use. This is how it's being done. We've got Excel in the middle, trying to bring all of this stuff together from a billing standpoint, a marketing standpoint, customer support standpoint, administration and governance, and other applications. So it is amazing, all of the stuff that we're trying to do. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that all of these things will go away, but the other thing I want to point out is some of them serve very well and integrate very nicely with cloud-based ERP-type systems, so that now you have that bi-directional data flow. You're not having to manage this huge middleware in the middle to get your business intelligence. So the application Hairball is alive and well in business today. So ultimately, it's important, I think, to strategically invest in the technology that you want to use. The old way is pay a lot up front, get a disk and pay $1 million, probably 33, 40 million. You're spending 4 times more implementing. That's the other thing I'll tell you from an implementation standpoint. Cloud lends itself to much quicker, easier implementation. And I want to point out, you do look at the processes, so it's not like you're just slapping something in. You take time to understand what's going on. But the other thing is you're not held hostage by annual maintenance, right? You're paying for a software. They're doing upgrade features. Most of these providers will have 2 upgrade cycles per year, so you're getting the latest and greatest every 6 months. So what's the new way? Pay as you go, and pay for what you need. So there's no cost managing the application that's borne by these cloud vendors. You pay a fraction of that perpetual license in subscription form. Pay it monthly, quarterly, whatever it is that's going to work best for you. And you renew only if you're satisfied with the value of the business application. And some people have said to me right there, well, yeah, there you go. So I'm on this cloud thing for a year, and it ain't working for me. Now I got to go back to on-premise. No, there are other cloud applications. Look at them. And what I will tell you is, if you spend time parsing and cleaning your data and getting it right to go into a certain cloud application, moving to another cloud application is not nearly as arduous as it is to go from an on-premise to an on-premise or an on-premise to a cloud application. Again, personal experience. So finance processes with a suite type of offering, right? You want to focus on integrating the management cycle. So you've got your actuals, your ERP is generating the data, it's integrated, you have the operational analytics, but there are other options out there that allow you to do very good continuous planning and it integrates well with these applications. You can have strong accountability with budgets. You can have collaborative forecasting. So when I talk about the workflow of the travel and expense report, imagine if you could have workflow from a budgeting, planning, and forecasting standpoint. What do I mean by that? Your salespeople are having input, your operations folks are having input, finance is, maybe spinning the final model, but it's constantly in motion. People are constantly adding new insights and new details, and you're gleaning that information real time. You're able to be proactive about the long-term, direction of where you want to take the company. So the integration is key on these things, right? Your strategy leads to your plan, and it goes down to the lowest level, letting people know what their execution responsibilities are. And you're able to continuously monitor performance, right? So if you've gone through the effort of putting together these goals, budgets, whatever term you want to use, now you can continuously monitor them. So the cloud enables finance to do a couple things. You can scale a distributed finance organization. What I tell people is think about NASA. If you've ever seen Apollo 13, all those engineers kind of know everything about that spaceship and the astronauts and everything. That's kind of what some of these cloud applications let you do. It's a little scary. I talked about SAS 70 Type 2 compliancy. Hey, you adopt some of these systems, you can just check the box because they've had to do this. They've had to get that certificate that says they're SAS 70 Type 2 compliant. I'm running out of time here, but I want to talk about the check process, and here we go. So this is what normally happens in most businesses I've been in. You put a PO together, you order something. Somebody orders it, and they stick it in a little file, then the thing comes in, you compare it to the purchase order, great. You slap it together, now you put a little payment requisition, you slap the whole payment package together, and you file it. Then it comes time for this controller, CFO to approve these things. You take all these check packages, if you will, you bring them into the person's office, lay them on their desks, and they go through and they oh yeah, this is good, great. So here you go, so now do the check run. So now they do the check run, you come back to the checks and you set them on the CFO's desk and he or she's like, okay, sign this, I'm not sure about this one. Can you go back to the files and pull that check package again? Sure, I'll go back and do that. Go back, pull the check file, come back to the office, sit down. Oh, yeah, I remember that. I'm going to sign that. So you get all the checks done, right? Now you take that, you hand it off to somebody else. Then somebody takes that and they have the check run. Now we're going to go run the checks, right? So they go run the checks, and the checks come back, be the check signer or whatever. the CFO, signs them, whatever. Now the checks come and they go back to somebody else who takes the checks, who bursts off all the little check stuff, attaches it back to the little package that's sitting in the file system, and now you take the checks and you stuff them in the envelopes, and you lick the envelopes, you put them through the Pitney Bowes machine or the stamp machine, you get the stamp, and you mail them out the door. Great. Now that's a great process. What if I told you you could do that completely paperless? When that CFO, like yours truly, is a little too lazy, I can't go into the files, I'm going to tell somebody else to do it. Now I can just point and click and see the detail of that check package. I can see the details of what's going on, who approved what. You can literally digitize it. And then what if I told you that information, you don't even have to mail a check out anymore. It could happen, you click a button, it'll go to a check processing center, and they will send out a check that will make you look like your General Mills or 3M, even though if you're a sole proprietor in Acadie, Iowa. So I'm telling you, this stuff can happen, and you can do it with these cloud things. Enough said. More tightly integrated analytics that we've talked about. Automatic upgrades, right? We don't have to worry about the maintenance and the version control. And you can reallocate that IT budget, perhaps to maybe have people on the IT side be the controller of the user experience. And I tell people, if you remember the old Saturday Night Live skit by Jimmy Fallon called Nick Burns, the company computer guy, you can maybe change that mindset or that visual to maybe an IT group who actually helps you and makes you enjoy your IT experience with your application. So moving away from spreadsheets and QuickBooks to the cloud, what does the cloud help you mitigate? And I think we've talked about the security of data. I truly believe your data is more secure in the cloud than it is sitting in an on-premise facility. There is one version of the truth now. People are not coming in with the reports from 10 different disparate systems, and you're arguing about what's right or wrong. Let me ask you something about Excel. I love to use Excel, but does anybody out there have a formula link or you have formula errors? Here's some things that have happened about that. And this is true. This comes from CFO Magazine. A cut and paste error cost TransAlta $24 million. A missing minus sign caused the Fidelity Magellan Fund to overstate projected earnings by $2.6 billion and missed a promised dividend. So what's interesting about these things is they have a real impact on a company. Remember that. If you're relying on some of these things, you have to make sure they are extremely accurate. And I can't imagine having to be responsible for an Excel spreadsheet that's gone to several different people. Compliance, we've talked about that quite a bit, right? So you're in compliance with SAS70 Type 2 compliancy and a host of other things, believe it or not. And you can control access to the data. So who gets to see it and what do they get to see when they access it? And then personal experience, and I would argue there's plenty of stuff out there in the press that you do really are able to reduce your costs with the cloud. But most importantly, and I've said this before, you improve your efficiency. I think that's paramount to remember. Improved efficiency is key to what you want to do. So some general tips for success. I would strongly recommend you assign a cross-functional team for the selection and the implementation, right? Because when we talk about order to cash, everybody's got their hand in that. You want to make sure that everybody agrees and understands that this is the best thing we should do. You want to assign business benefit goals and measures. So make sure, very simply, you put a plan together and you have deadlines and milestones that you need to hit. Broaden ERP usage across business and departments. So the usage tends to go up. People are going to use the product more. They're going to use the tool more. It's more intuitive. It speaks to them more because it's focusing them in on what they need to be focused on. Ensure you'll get clear visibility into ERP data. So the information that is in the system now is checked by a lot of eyes, and it usually is pretty accurate. I'm not saying that everything's not error-free, but we are human, and we need to look at things, and you can have a lot of nice reports that can bring this to your attention real time if necessary. And you need to plan for a distributed mobile organization. This is happening, folks. They call it work shifting. You can work from anywhere. You need to provide them with the capability to get that done so they can be the most effective where they are. And with that, I will turn it back to my friend Ernie.
Thank you very much, Tom, for that great content. We're now going to go ahead and launch our polling questions. We would love to have everyone in the audience answer the polling questions. We share that benchmarking data on Proformative. Please note, for those of you in the audience who are here for CPE credits, you'll need to answer all of our polling questions today. We're going to go ahead and launch our first polling question. We're going to have the polling question as we start a Q&A session with Tom for the sake of time. One of the first questions, Tom, is what happens to the historical information? Let's say you change between SaaS providers, and then what's the cost of integrating and maintaining that historical data?
Yeah, and this is not really a cloud or SaaS question. It's really any systems question when you're going from one to the other. So here's what I would tell you. Usually in the on-premise world, you got to get it pretty exact and right, because when you go live, stuff has to be locked and loaded from a historical standpoint. What a nice feature is with these cloud applications is the wonderful CSV import. They have great tools for it. They make it pretty easy, so the novice individual can do these uploads. What you have the ability to do at that point is with any bringing in of past history, number one, you want to make sure it's accurate. You want to clean it, but then you want to start bringing it into the system. You can tend to divide and conquer that. You can technically maybe go live on the system and only bring over 3 months of data, but then you decide you want to have 6, 9, or 12. You can then go back and keep importing it till you get to the level of historical information you want within the system. So it's kind of up to the individual and what the company's needs are. I've seen some companies keep the legacy system up and running for a short time so people still have access to it. So there's several ways to do it, but what I would tell you is you have the luxury of doing it big bang all at once, or you also have the luxury of doing it a little bit each day, a little bit each week, a little bit each month.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. We have a question around, I think you touched on this, but some people having questions around the ability to what you would call, what you had a better word, customize the software. So people are mentioning that it might not be practical for many organizations. Let's say you've spent a lot of time doing some customized programming. How do folks address that issue, or can you speak to the ability to customize those applications?
I can. First, I'm a real believer in, many of these companies have been there and done that, and they've seen a lot of things. So what I would challenge an organization is to take a look at your process, or what it is that you really have to customize, and really ask the tough questions. Why are we customizing it? Why do we really need this information? Really drill down on that. What it then can go to is, let's say you really do need to have a customization, not a configuration. You need to customize certain aspects of this, whether it's a data capture or whatever. Most of these outfits will provide you with, scripting capabilities, coding capabilities, where you actually can, in quotes, customize components of their software so it can, customize or, uniquely fit to your unique business need, if you will. But I'll tell you, I think Pareto, I think it's more than 80-20 mostly. I think it's 90-10. I think 10% of what companies do can be considered unique. And I would argue in that 10%, you really need to drill down on why you have to customize it. So.
Okay, great. Someone's asking specifically about the payroll applications. Is there an application? I think ADP's already would be considered cloud-based. ADP and Paychex, do those integrate with these systems that you know of?
Yeah, in two ways. Many times, at a minimum, you can do a CSV import of anything, so to whatever degree you want to go to. But both of those entities have what they call connectors that they offer to many of the cloud providers. So they're thought through. So going back to the integration piece where I was saying, when you upgrade to a new version and the link's broken and it doesn't work, these connectors, what they do is they're developing the new version. They're making sure the connectors will work. So when you flip the switch and go live, all of a sudden your payroll data isn't feeding over anymore. They're testing that as they provide the upgrades. So that's something to keep in mind if you decide to go that route. You can do that as well.
Okay, great. We'll have time for one more question, then we'll close the Q&A session. And any questions that we did not get to, we'll post those on Proformative.com. Tom, you mentioned on one of your final slides that there's a great ability to mitigate risk. So if you had to, name, let's say the top 2 risks that companies will mitigate or become improved in the risk management front, if they would move from an Excel or QuickBooks to the cloud, what would those be?
First and foremost, the security of that data. So where I was getting it before, hacking into it, data getting into the wrong hand, that type of thing. So making sure your data is secure, disaster recovery, all that good stuff. The second thing is access to that data. You can really limit the accessibility to what someone will see based on their credentials when they log in. So if it's just a salesperson and you want them to see one customer, you can nail it down to that degree. If it's a CEO and you don't want that person to do anything but look at data, you can actually give them that type of user experience where they can't change anything, but they look at anything they want. So it runs the gamut in terms of what you can do. Those are the 2 big things from a security standpoint that I would say I've been able to leverage the cloud.
Okay, great. That will close our Q&A session. We'd like to thank Tom for his time and insights. If you'd like us to connect you directly with Tom, those of you in the audience, please indicate that on the survey that we will invite you to take at the conclusion of the webinar. Tom is clearly a leader in his field and an excellent source of information on cloud and all related topics. Thanks again to our sponsors, NetSuite and Adaptive Planning. Again, any CPE-related credit issues, please email Tanya Walsh at twalsh@proformative.com. Finally, I would like to thank the audience for your valuable time, and note that we will share the polling data information on Proformative.com in the near future. With that, I would like to conclude the webinar and wish everyone to have a great day, and we very much appreciate your support of Proformative. Thank you very much.